Welcome everyone to today's session in our virtual series. It's our last virtual series session for this year, 2021. And the next component, that study hall session, will occur in January of next year, 2022. And besides that, on our website that Adam was talking about earlier during this little kind of prep time, on our website, and I believe he did put it in the chat, there is a link to not only the video recordings of our virtual series, but our up and coming program for next year is also on our website. So you can take a look at that to see what they are, because some are in person and some are virtual. My name is Matthew Pacer. I'm one of the reference librarians. My main responsibilities are for the Michigan collection. I help assist and coordinate the digitization program and work with the rare book room and a few other items, duties as assigned by my supervisor. So I'm glad to be here. So let's go ahead and get talking about Michigan newspaper resources at the Library of Michigan. If I can get this to, there we go. So what is the Library of Michigan? So we are that institution that's created to kind of collect, preserve, and provide access to the story of the state. Its community and support local public libraries. Now, we were formed in 1828 as a territorial library. So we had, I don't know, maybe 130, 140 items in our collection at the beginning. And then we grew. 1837, we became the state library with statehood, yay for statehood. And then we packed up all of our bags and moved over here from Detroit to Lansing in 1847. So that had been an interesting trip since there was no 96, 94, and so forth. In 1983, we became, through Public Act 540, the Library of Michigan. So as to help differentiate us between Michigan State University Library. And then finally, in 1988, we moved into our new building because we had several different locations, like the Capitol building built, I think it was the third one that was built in 1877, and a few other places that we had a location at. But that building that we currently reside in is at the bottom right-hand side of your screen. Now, the library itself occupies the left-hand side, or the west side of the building, floors 2, 3, 4, and 5. And the State Museum and the State Archives occupies the right side of the building. So a little bit of newspapers at a glance. So I'm going to talk about both our print collection and the access that we provide to Michigan residents or Michigan residents with a library card to newspaper resources. So a little bit of digital and our print collection, because the Library of Michigan is open its normal operating hours, Monday through Friday, 10 to 5, and Saturdays 10 to 4. So here at the library itself, LM owns at least one reel of newspapers from each county. So it's 83. Now, most of our collection is on microfilm, and we have, I think, about 70,000 or so reels of newspapers on film. We do have current newspapers, and we do our best to maintain a current subscription to as many of the currently published newspapers throughout Michigan, downstate and upstate. And then, as I briefly mentioned a little bit ago, some of the papers are accessible through databases, and that's going to be that second part of today's presentation. And then at the end, after that, I am going to do kind of a little bit of a show and tell demonstration to go to our website and show you how to navigate to some of these resources that we have. So a little bit of locations of the newspapers. Our current newspapers in the building are shelved on the third floor on the south side of the building. So if you are unfamiliar with our building, there's a large atrium that's kind of in the center of our side of the building, and south of the atrium is the south side, and then there's a north side. The current newspapers are on the south side, along with, it's on the third floor, and on the second floor, the south side, is the microfilm room, where we have numerous cabinets with all of the newspapers on film. And then we do have computers that you can access the different databases inside the building. And there are some ways I'll talk about later about how to access the databases outside of our building, at least for a few of them for right now. So finding titles, that's one of the big questions that researchers have. How can I find titles? Well, there's really three good ways. Using the catalog, answercat.org, it's our online catalog, so you can see the location of the newspapers. You can look at the newspapers holding list, and I'll show you how to navigate to that through our website later on. And then the newspaper family history list, which is also linked through not just the catalog, but you can access it through the website itself, which it will not give you every single newspaper title through the family history list, but it will give you many titles. And there's some more interesting things I will talk about the family history list later on. So the first one, let's talk about the catalog, because you want to make it your friend, because this is the best way if you have a title or even a good partial title to search, because you can search by the title itself. You can use the subject. So the example I have here is you can use like Mish and periodicals or Mish and newspapers. So something like Lansing Mish newspapers, or if you're looking for journals, periodicals, Lansing Mish periodicals. There's also, keyword. So you can use like a county or city name, like Ingham County newspapers or Monroe County, Keweenaw County newspapers. So you can see a results list of the newspapers that cover that area. And I'll show you why this could be very important in a little bit. Here, AnswerCat Part 2 slide just shows you a picture of our catalog itself when you go to answercat.org. As you can see at the top, you can do the keyword and title searching. But then towards the bottom, you can use an advanced search if you want. There is an LC subject search, which can be very useful, as I mentioned before in the slide about using subject searches. Because if we were to use a subject search and say let's use Ingham County or Lansing newspapers, and actually I use this in this example, Lansing Mish newspapers in the subject search to show you how to use the catalog and what to look for. So if we were to complete that search, Lansing Mish newspapers, we see at the bottom in the results list that we have 3 results. We have Lansing Mish newspapers, Lansing Mish history, and Lansing Mish indexes. And that would be important in a little bit. Because what we want to do for this, slide demonstration is to click on that choice, Lansing Mish newspapers. Because when you click on that title to get you the list of newspapers for Lansing, you're going to get an alphabetical list like you see as an example in front of you. So we have different titles like the Chronicle, the City Pulse, the Evening Telegram, the Gas Mask. It's an interesting paper. So you can then scroll through the list. It might just be a few papers on the results list, or you might have to scroll down and perhaps even go to a next page to see how many newspapers are listed. But once you find the title that you're interested in and you want to learn more, you go ahead and click on the title. And there are a few things here that I want to point out to you. Things like publication dates, the holdings, and the title changes. So towards the top of the record that you see in the picture, it says connect to newspapers publishing history. That's that link I briefly mentioned about the family histories of the newspapers. That's one way to get to the family histories. Below that, it tells us a little bit about the paper title that we clicked on itself. This particular one says 1911, January 23 to 1911, February 11th. A little bit below that, we see locations. We have a copy of this reel, as does the Archives of Michigan. And then even below that, it says continued by and formed by, so that it gives you an idea of what the previous title is and what it was formed by, because then you can follow the trail going forward, or you can follow the trail going backward in the newspaper's history. Now, the record itself is fairly large. So if you keep scrolling down, this is the bottom half of that record on the previous slide, you're going to get things like that publication history and things like notes or local notes. And it is important to look at that note or the local note field just to see what kind of information is there. If we know that there are missing papers, missing years, we will enter that into the catalog record. Or if something happened to make newspapers not available. The best example that I can give is the strikes. I believe there were 2 to 3 strikes in Detroit for the Free Press and the Detroit News in the 60s, I believe. And in the notes field, we list out there are no papers available for the News or the Free Press for those time blocks. And that information is in that note or that local note field. So those are very good things to look at when you're looking at the record itself. Sorry, the computer is moving a little slow as it's moving through these flash out arrows. So besides the catalog, you can get to a newspaper list through our LM newspaper holding list on our website. So if you use any search engine and go to our website, Library of Michigan, and get to our website, towards the top menu area, you'll see a couple different tabs, as you see in front of you, for the public, for libraries, state employees. If you're to click on that caret, that down arrow to the right of for the public, you're going to see another subset of menu. And one of the choices in that gray box is going to be Library of Michigan newspapers. And once you click on that, you're going to be given 3 different options. And those options are going to look like that little box on the left-hand side of your screen that says Library of Michigan newspapers, family histories, newspaper resources, and film, newspapers on microfilm at LM. And when you click on newspapers on microfilm at LM, a new page will pop up and you'll see the county listing. And I just took a quick snapshot of just part of the county listing from Alcona to Branch. So you can scroll through that list to the county you want. And in the box on the right-hand side of your screen, I clicked on Ingham County and took a little snapshot of a few of the papers. So once you click on the county, you're going to see an alphabetical list of the places. And then you will see an alphabetical list of the papers within each place. So if we see, Lansing on that right-hand side of your screen, we see that there's the gas mask, 1920. There's a Lansing Capital News, 1921 to 32, so on and so forth. Now, when you're looking at this list, a few things to keep in mind is that when you see a single year under a newspaper title, like Independent or Gas Mask, it's a single year, 1920 or 1870, that means that we could potentially have the entire year, or we may have part of the year, or we may have just a single issue for that newspaper. So it's always good to take that title and to search the catalog for that newspaper. If you see a date range that has a beginning year and an end year of 9999, that usually indicates that we still have a current subscription to that newspaper. So that's something that, that we get, it's on our shelves in the current newspaper, and we are waiting to get the microfilm copy. So that's, the second way that you can find newspaper titles, on microfilm that we have at the Library of Michigan. But you can also use that newspaper family history that I mentioned. So remember in the previous slide, I mentioned those 3 choices, one being the family history choice. That gets you to another list where you can see the relationships between papers. And as I pointed out earlier, if the newspaper title has that connect to publishing history, you can go right to its publishing history to see that family tree that a bunch of librarians at the Library of Michigan several decades ago researched and put together. So on our website, if you were to click on that family history link, you're going to get to a page that will look like this a little bit, a Michigan cities list. And then you'll simply click on the link of the city falling within the letter, Michigan cities falling within E or within G, so on and so forth. I'm choosing L for Lansing. And when I do that, I will have a list of different newspapers I could potentially click on. And for this example in front of you, I chose Lansing State Journal because it is a newspaper that has changed titles many times over the years and has had a lot of mergers or absorbed other papers. So the page you see in the newspaper family history tree, is page 2. There's a previous page because I believe the original paper title was the State Republican. And then as you can see towards the top, there's a Lansing Tri-Weekly, but there was also the Lansing Weekly. Those were 2 separate editions. Then moving down, there was the State Republican that came from the Lansing Tri-Weekly, and it merged with the Lansing Journal, and so on and so forth. So way back a couple slides, when I was showing the catalog record for a particular newspaper, that happens to be that middle Lansing Journal Republican. So if you look in the middle of that screen, Lansing Journal Republican 1911 through 1911. That was that little example that I showed you that occurred for like a month maybe. So this is, one paper that has a lot of different name changes. Now, this is going to be very important when coming to use our collections that I'm going to help illustrate in a few seconds here, because newspapers on film, in the cabinets themselves, they're organized alphabetically, first by town, and then by title, and then chronologically by date. So if you have a title change, those title changes are going to occur inside the drawer. So it might make it finding the title a little bit challenging. So as a good illustration, this is the best representation I can show you about inside the cabinets. So if we're looking at the Lansing State Journal, in one cabinet, alphabetically, Lansing State Journal, it's going to fall. However, it has other titles. And if we know that the other title is the State Journal, but then it began with the State Republican falls after alphabetically State Journal. So in the drawer itself, the more current years of the State Journal are going to come before the older years of the State Republican. So as I said, Lansing is a pretty good case of this, but it will happen from time to time with other newspapers as they change titles. So something to be aware of once you do make that decision to visit us and for a research trip and wanting to use the microfilm itself. But once you're in the building and you found your reels and you're ready to get going, we do have traditional reels, traditional readers that you can just set up their microfilm and just view the film itself. We do have view scan. We have 12 view scan machines that you can use to print from the film. So you can crop a section of the newspaper, like an article or an obituary or a death notice, and you can print it in the building. You can either send it to yourself through email, or you can save it to a flash drive. So there's a couple of different options available to you once you do find those articles or those notices that you want to obtain a copy of. And you're more than welcome to come and contact us at the reference desk if you have any issues with, loading the reels and focus and zoom and things like that. Staff is available and willing to help. So this is a few extra helping bits of information that may help with using newspapers in our collections. In the newspaper microfilm room, there are some print indexes, and those that you see right there are just some of them. We have them on blue shelves. Grand Rapids, 1996, 2006. There are some indexes that are published by local historical organizations and genealogical societies. Some indexes could be on fiche. There are not many, but as I said before, that's where you want to make the catalog your friend, because if you remember way back earlier in the presentation, I said we had those 3 results in the list, one of them being 44 results of newspapers, but then there was one that had about history, and there's one that talked about indexes. So if you do, or if you're searching for newspapers, definitely run a search like Ingham County newspaper so that you can see those results, so that, oh, maybe there is a link for indexes because maybe an organization or even a person has done some type, even if it's a very limited index or some kind of compilation. You should be able to discover it that way, and that might make your family history research that much more productive or easier, because someone may have already done some work for you that you do not know. And feel free to definitely also go to the internet and go to the newspaper website if the newspaper is still functioning. Perhaps they themselves have some type of search feature that you can use on their website and then come back to us to get at the microfilm itself. So now what we're going to do is I'm going to segue from the print into our digital collections. So remember, if you go to our website, the Library of Michigan, or michigan.gov/Library of Michigan, we've got those 3 little tabs for the public, libraries, and for state employees. Now, if we click on for the public, there's going to be a couple different boxes or choices, and those are some of the ones that you see on the left-hand side of your screen: family history, newspapers, notable books, government information, rare books. But the most important here for our talk is get a library card, because we provide access at the Library of Michigan to several different databases, but you need to have a Library of Michigan library card to access them. And Michigan residents can apply to get a library card with us. And then with that library card number and PIN, you can access the different databases. So on our web page, once you go there and you scroll down, and I will show this during the demonstration, there's a blue link for get a library card. Once you click on that, well, I think it's a blue link from the main page. This is what it should look like on the main page. And there's the blue link, michigan.gov/library card. And you click on that link, it will take you to another page where it gives some brief information at the top of the screen. And then below it is the actual form that you can fill out: your name, your address, your email, your phone number, and then you will submit it, and it will get sent to a holding account, and it will be divided up, and then we'll process it, and you'll get a digital library card that you can use to access the databases. And then when you decide to venture into the library, we can convert that to an actual physical library card that you can use to check out items that are copy 2s and copy 3s, but also then use that physical card with its number and its PIN to access the same databases. So once as a Michigan resident, you do have your library card and PIN, under the link Family History, and it's from our web page, and on the right-hand side is the the little image so far that we have on our webpage to get to the family history section. And under the family history section are different family history databases. Now, I've just pulled just the newspaper titles that we have, or some of them that we have currently. Things like the Free Press, newspapers.com, Library Edition, Detroit News, Grand Rapids Press. We also recently added Ann Arbor News as well. Now, the caveat I'm going to say here is with the newspapers.com. It's the Library Edition. Currently, we do have external access with your library card as a Michigan resident. We are uncertain how long that's going to continue since it's also a part of Ancestry. So once we hear more, you can go to our website, and that's where we're going to put the updated information about whether the remote access to newspapers.com will continue into the new year. So first, I'm going to talk about Newspaper Archive. So once you are to access Newspaper Archive, you'll get like a map of the United States, and you can click on Michigan and get to the Michigan titles, and you can explore the newspapers by city. So as you can see in front of you, those are roughly the cities that are covered in Newspaper Archive. And once you click on a city of interest that you want to see what they have, you'll get a listing of the newspapers itself. So for example, you can see here the different ones for Ironwood. And we'll have examples like, say, American Citizen, and it gives the year 1893 to 1893. Very similar to what I mentioned before. It might be a full run or it may not be. It is what the company has copyright access to digitize and to make available, and what was still, what newspapers were still around and could be copied itself. So if you're interested in one of the newspapers, you can then go ahead and click on that title itself in Newspaper Archive, and then it'll open up a search box, and then you can run searches within that newspaper. And then there are different options to print and to save and so forth. Another resource that some of you may already have a personal edition is newspapers.com. This is the library edition of newspapers.com, so there will be some differences. I know from my coworker, Adam, our newspapers.com library edition has less Michigan coverage of, say, like the Lansing State Journal than his individual subscription. So there will be differences. So the best thing that I can tell you as researchers is, if you do have your individual subscription, use both. See what the difference is, because maybe we'll have access to papers that perhaps your individual account does not. But what I like to tell researchers to do that is very useful is to definitely, once you're in the newspapers.com home screen that you see in front, towards the right-hand side, you'll see the button See All, so you can see all the newspapers. And then within each tile or square that you see, the three examples of the Sun and Ty Cobb is stabbed and so forth for the Ogden Standard and so forth, for whatever those papers are. Below it, you will see the year coverage for those papers. So when I click to the next slide here, which just covers Michigan, you can see that this quick snapshot, we've got things like the Belding Banner, Calumet News, Cass County Republican, and then right below it, as I mentioned, the year count. So if I look at Calumet News, 1896 through 1914, and it's giving us that it has like 17,616 pages within that newspaper. On the left-hand side of the screen in its navigation menu, you can see towards the top, yes, there is a search box to type in paper name keywords. There's a date range field. And then below that, you can pop to different states. another great collection of, or database, I should say, is the Detroit Free Press. And what you see in front of you is you would look under, what you see in front of you is the main search box. And you can type your keywords, and above that main search box, you can click on advanced search to get more search fields. You can click on publications. I'll get back to that in a little bit. But if you look to the bottom of this page here, you'll see that included databases. It says ProQuest Historical Newspapers, the Free Press, 1831 to 1922. ProQuest Historical Newspapers, Detroit Free Press, 1923 through 1999. So within this large database, they have, in a sense, broken down into two sections. But when you search, you're searching across them all. So if we were to complete a search using this basic search box and get a results list, what I have here is the publications listing. This is just a sample of the 11 publications that make up the Free Press over time. So that when we see here, the Daily Press, the Democratic Free Press, the Democratic Free Press 1842 to 1848, those are just some of the titles that would have started and merged, changed names over the years to get us to what we know as the Detroit Free Press. So when you're searching that big collection of the Detroit Free Press, you're searching all these papers within the database itself. So that once you actually complete a search for any topic or title, and this is just a generic search for an example here, you're going to get a results list. It might be large or small. You might have to scroll down and with other pages. To view a newspaper in the list, you can click on the title. You can also use the date ranges on the left-hand side menu to, in a sense, filter down to maybe a decade or even a year and a month to narrow your search. Once you're inside a newspaper itself, because you want to view this particular article or this story, you will see a screen appear in the page in front of you that sort of looks like the example on the screen in front. And you can have different controls. So towards the upper right-hand corner, this one happens to be just for a particular article instead of the full page. There is a little print icon so you can print the story. There's a little down arrow icon so you can download the story for saving. I believe it's not really a pipe, but the 3 dots will give you a way to the option to email yourself, which is also in the upper right-hand corner along with the print button. There's the email button and also another download button and how to cite it. So there are different options that you can use to capture this information if you need it for your research. And many of the databases do have some features very similar to that. Now, the next slide, I want to briefly talk about, there are a few print resources, I just list them here, that could be helpful for general newspaper research, like the American Newspaper Directory or the Michigan Newspaper Directory, or the Genealogical Column Directory. That one particularly I put in here, but it's located in the archives, which is why I have that in brackets. And then newspaper research. So those are some useful tools to help delve into and dive into newspaper research. And I put them up here because newspaper research is both fun and exciting and can be very enlightening, because newspapers are a treasure trove of information, not just for vital records, notices, marriages, and so forth, but those gossip columns to get some background or information about, society life, what was going on in the community, maybe some legal articles or notices, local political stories, news stories, definitely ads if you're family history research is kind of geared towards, and you find a company that belonged or your family member worked at, you can capture or look at ads. But also from our viewpoint, newspapers were the email, the Facebook, the Instagram, the chat, the texting of the day. So if you are conducting research and you're learning that these family members that you're working on were very, say, passionate about education or about lumbering or about different stories, look in the op-eds, look in the editorial sections. Maybe they contributed, maybe they wrote something to the newspaper. So newspaper research can be very beneficial for you. But specifically, if we're looking at birth and marriage, newspaper research can give you some information such as maybe like a photograph of the bride or groom, perhaps, a list of attendants and relatives, maybe with some birth information, maybe a parent name, maybe occasionally a hospital name, a location that can help flesh out research information. If we're looking at obituaries and death notices, not just dates, but maybe through a death notice, maybe a cause or a burial place, maybe even a service location. The obituaries, as many of us know, will hopefully provide more details, hopefully maybe a decent biographical background, perhaps survivors, and maybe even work highlights or cause of death. So again, depending what, if the family member determined, yes, we're going to write a obituary, what information is included, because they did cost. So in some cases, they were not printed because of the cost. But when looking for marriage and birth, divorce, and those date-specific type things, exact dates are best, but definitely if you can narrow it down by to like a week or a month, that will help, because there are not a lot of complete indexes out there. And for some papers, you might have to spin microfilm day by day by day if you're uncertain when a person passed away or when a person was married, and if you're looking for that type of material. And sometimes perhaps things like, say, for an obituary and death notice, maybe the death notice is the only thing that shows. So a few ideas as right before I get into the demonstration of the presentation. Definitely think about the newspaper design. So as you're using the newspaper and researching it, is there a table of contents, or are you noticing that the obituaries seem to fall in this section of the newspaper? Those little reoccurring clues so that help speed up your research. Definitely think about different coverage in newspapers. If you're looking for information in Detroit, yes, we have the two large papers, Free Press and the News. Definitely look at both, or other local papers that cover the same year, because perhaps maybe one newspaper covered it and another newspaper didn't. Something else to think about, definitely with family history research that I have come across when helping researchers who've emailed or called or walked into the building, thinking about nearby counties, cities, or states. So a good example is you're researching a family member trying to find an obituary. But in your research that you've already conducted, not just say they grew up in a different city, but maybe they held a job for a long period of time in a different city. It will be beneficial to check that other city's newspaper, because that person may have had more of a community grounding where the family, if they did decide to contribute obituary, may have placed it in that paper instead of the location of where the person, in the paper falling within the location where the person passed away for an obituary. So that's something to think about, is what other newspapers could contain this information based on what I know about the family member I'm researching, because they might have strong community connections elsewhere. So that wraps up me talking with the with the presentation, because now what I want to do is I'm going to do a new share and share our website so I can actually show you what I've talked about here. So give me a few quick seconds here to do another share of my screen. I'm going to actually stop my share and then share it again. And we'll try this again because I could not find what I wanted to find. Oh, there it is. I think. Haha. Here we go. So does everyone see the Library of Michigan website? I think I shared the correct screen, or tab, I should say. Yes, thank you, Tom. Moving between different pages can be a little tricky sometimes. So this is our library website, Library of Michigan, and there's those tabs that I mentioned for the public, for libraries, for state employees. A few things to point out so you can access some of these digital resources. Definitely, you can access the catalog right from our website, right here in this box, answer catalog search, keyword, author, title, and you can bounce right over into the catalog from here. But if we scroll down a little bit, there's that library card link that I showed you on the presentation with the blue link. So I'm going to click on it just to show you the form. And it's thinking. There we go. Those are the forms I mentioned. It gives you a little bit of information about the library card. And as you scroll down and scroll down, you have the note, the actual fields that you can fill out: last name, first name, what's required and what's not. And then towards the bottom is your submit button. And then, as I said, the process, it gets into a queue, it's divided out, and about a day or so, we'll send you the virtual card with its number and PIN that you can use to access the database. So I'm going to go click the back button, and I'm going to now bounce over to the family history section, family history resources and virtual series. So Michigan.gov family history. So under family history, we scroll down. There's the family history virtual series that we've been completing now with this. And I keep scrolling down. As Adam mentioned early on in the presentation, recordings of the family history virtual series sessions are right here linked, so you can pop to the previously recorded sessions. Online newspaper databases pending. That's this one. But then if I go down past family history resources and then to family history databases. So the newspaper databases and our other databases are all here. And if we receive any new information about, say, newspapers.com having remote access being canceled, as we list here under Ancestry Library Edition, if we read at the end of the phrase, remote access will end December 31st. If we know any new information, this is where we're going to put it. So definitely check back. But there are other newspaper resources here. There's the Ann Arbor News Historical and Current Collection through Newsbank. We scroll down, another couple things I want to point out. Detroit News Historical, MLive Publications. I'm going to come back to this in a little bit because I want to point this one out. Grand Rapids, just through the present through Newsbank. Definitely want to point Heritage Hub. This is something that we, database that we subscribed to earlier in the summer. And as it says here, it's a premier collection of US obituaries and death notices for biographical and genealogical research, covering roughly 1824 to today, and includes all 50 states. That's the best year breakdown that we can give 1824 to today, because it really depends on the newspaper itself and what licensing agreements. So Heritage Hub by Newsbank is a great resource for those obituaries and death notices. And then keeping scrolling down, there's that newspaper archive that I mentioned, and newspapers.com, Ancestry World Edition. And that's the one that we're uncertain yet if this newspapers.com is going to continue on into the new year. We have the ProQuest Ethnic News Watch, many newspapers from around the world. ProQuest Historical Newspapers, Detroit Free Press. ProQuest Historical Newspapers, the Michigan Chronicle, covering 1936 to 2010. And then another newspaper that we added earlier this year around the summertime, the historical newspapers from ProQuest, the Globe and Mail for Toronto. And they kind of merged and became one, the Globe and Mail, but they were individual papers, as a little description below. 1844 through 36 in the Globe and Mail, then 1936 through 27. I'm going to answer a question that I just saw in the chat that Anita said, is there anything in particular to know about finding foreign language Michigan newspapers, such as Detroit Abendpost, for the German immigrants? If you go to that county listing that I mentioned, it has all of our counties. I'm going to show that in a little bit. And you click on the county itself, it's alphabetical by place. And the Detroit Abendpost is somewhere under Wayne. And I'll show that and get there in a little bit. It's a large amount of words, because the one thing I want to point out here is I want to go back up to the Detroit News because of these MLive publications. So we're going to think about it. Hopefully it'll allow me through. I had an issue with this earlier today when I was doing a test run. It kicked me out. Good, it did not, because this is what I wanted to show. Because we don't list these all on the website. So when you click on that link that I just did, Detroit Newspapers MLive Publications, Historic and Current, what you see in front of you, like Jackson Citizen, Muskegon Chronicle, and so forth, we do have limited access to some of these newspapers electronically for some of the more current years. I'm going to click on one. Hopefully it won't bounce me out. I'm just going to click on Muskegon Chronicle collection. Good, it did not. So I can scroll down and show you. So within Muskegon Chronicle, it's telling us Muskegon Chronicle, 1997 to current. That's the text. Muskegon Chronicle, 2018 current. It's a newspaper format image, but important. Muskegon Chronicle, the web edition articles. Web only source. Because as some of you may have already seen, that with a lot of MLive publications and even other newspapers, they're having, if it's in print, and this is print, and maybe there's some added online content only if you have a subscription. So I'm going to go back, and I wanted to briefly talk about this. Is these papers are here in this list, like Midland, Flint, Grand Rapids, because they're MLive publications, and many newspapers are ceasing to publish in print. And as part of our licensing agreements, that we were to get microfilm copies of these papers, this was the solution for these papers. Like, we'll provide some digital access as part of the agreement. So that's why these papers are here. I am uncertain if they're here in perpetuity or not, but definitely want to make you aware of these extra newspapers that we have. We just don't have them listed on our website. So I'm going to go back. And then I see Susan has a question, I believe. I don't know if Susan can unmute herself or not to ask the question before I move on. I'll give another couple seconds if she can't.
Okay,
Okay, there we go.
this is Susan. I don't know if it's
Hello,
me,
thank you.
Susan, but I was typing a question in.
Yeah.
I have a newspaper clipping. It is not an obituary. It's about a family member. I think it's from over in Grand Rapids area. I don't have a date. I don't have the name of the newspaper. And I'm wondering, is there a way that we can find that particular newspaper? Because I have the newspaper.com access and I can't find it. So I don't know if there's a way to, you own something in your family archive. How do you find it? Is that possible?
Okay, good question. I will go ahead and do the best to answer it. Those type of questions we do receive from time to time, and they can be extremely challenging to find. You did one thing that I would have definitely done. Run, if you have the title of the newspaper article, names in the newspaper article, through newspapers.com. If you have like we have a subscription to the Grand Rapids Press, I would definitely be trying to run that through our digital or online subscription to see if it pops up. If it doesn't, the next step in any case is, okay, I have this clipping. I have a reasonable understanding that it's from this town and this newspaper. I would then follow up by contacting that local public library to see if they maintain a vertical file, a newspaper clipping file, because perhaps the newspaper story itself may have warranted being clipped and kept for their clippings file. That's kind of a long shot, but it's still an avenue to pursue. We here at the Library of Michigan do have a vertical file of newspaper clippings, but it covers more, top biographical topics and subject topics that cover Michigan in general. So articles like on, the Tigers, Sparky Anderson, former governors, and so forth. So you might be, if you've run names and title of the newspaper through newspapers.com and say the Grand Rapids Press, if you have access digitally to that, or through a library like us, or maybe contacting the Grand Rapids Public Library, and that stops, then it becomes more challenging to figure out what paper that it comes from. But if you have, but you can email us and we can explore that further. And at the end, I will put up my or our contact information at the end of the presentation. Because what I want to do now is I want to go and show you those two, the the newspaper holding list, and then where the family history section, the family history trees are at. So you can see those and then open it up to questions. So if I look back at the top of the screen where it says for the public, got that down arrow. I'm going to click on that down arrow so we can get to the newspapers. See, this time it's right here, Library of Michigan newspapers. I'm going to click on that link. And as I said earlier in the presentation, we have those three options: family histories, newspaper resources, newspapers on microfilm. So if I click newspapers on microfilm, then I get to that county listing that I mentioned before. It's just alphabetical. And I'm going to click on Wayne so I can try to answer the previous question of Detroit Aubin Post. So I clicked on Wayne, and alphabetical, Bellevue, Canton, Detroit, and then an alphabetical list of the papers, English or other language, Thinai, Ad Dalil, Post, I'm looking, Ledawi, I think that's the Polish paper. I'm just going through the list, trying to read them to see if I can find Gazette, Chronicle, Detroiter, Detroit News, Post. There's a lot here. I see Tom said the Detroiter in the chat, the Tribune. There it is, Detroiter Aubin Post. Thank you, time I was slowly going through and reading all these, the Polski, the Donetski, Detroit Hungarian News. I'm not even going to try to pronounce that. So yes, when we do have copies of foreign language newspapers coming out of different cities and we have them on microfilm, they're going to be in our county listings. And then for the Abendpost, we're looking at 1888 through 1931. And then, as I mentioned before, individual titles or individual years, 1879, it could be a full year, it could be a partial or even one issue, depending on what was filmed at the time. So definitely take the title and go back to the catalog to see what we do have on film. So I'm going to go ahead and scroll back up to the top. And I'm going to then just go ahead and click on For the Public so I can get back to this main page. And I'm going to open it up for questions. I want to thank everyone for listening to me talk for this last hour. Sorry it took so long. I apologize for it, but go ahead. You can unmute yourself if you can, or if not, if you want to just type in a question in chat, myself, I will answer them as best as I can. And again, thank you for attending this evening. Either I can try to answer the question or Adam can type an answer in chat if he's still having technical issues with his sound. Or if somebody wants me to talk again about something in particular.
So I have a question.
Okay.
I'm from Michigan, grew up in Michigan, but I live in Littleton, Colorado now.
Mm-hmm.
Am I able to get a library card? Is there to do it for a fee or something?
Unfortunately, we currently have no fee set up. It's Michigan residents only at the current time. Staff have talked about your exact question about fee setup, but it's so far only Michigan residents. What I suggest from where you're at, if you haven't already, to one, definitely contact your local public library, and two, contact your state library to see what subscriptions they have. They themselves may have, access to newspapers.com or other resources that may have some newspaper coverage. But if you're looking for very specific questions, like I'm looking for a death notice, I'm looking for a marriage information, I'm looking for this article that should have occurred, between January 1st and January 10th in the Grand Rapids Press, you can always email us and we can do our best to do that research and see if we can find it for you and then email you a copy of that article or that obituary.
Great. Okay. So I do have a very specific date and county of an incident. So I'll follow up.
Yep, then email. So what I'm going to do is go to the main page. I'm going to scroll down because it's got our phone number at the bottom of the page, which you should see, 517-335-1477. But then most important, the email. For these types of reference questions, we definitely ask you to email us so that we have all the information, and then it can be sent to one of us librarians to work on. All right. So I'm going to kind of have the page left right here for those who want to copy that information down.
That's great. Thank you.
And then another question that Adam answered in the chat, in case you're not looking at the chat, I got a library card a few years ago. Does one have to renew it? And as Adam correctly pointed out, they have to be renewed typically after 1 to 2 years. So if you do have a library card with us from the past, 1 year ago, 2, 3 years ago, send us an email and we can look up your record. Any other questions?
Yeah, I had a question. I put it in the chat as well. So I know that in newspapers.com you can search by names or other keywords. And I was wondering for the other databases that you showed us, whether you can also search within
Yes.
the papers.
If we can search within the results list, you mean? Is that what?
Well, search it, so you can search what is inside of the paper. So for example, you can search somebody's name or
Yes.
something like that.
Yeah, each of those databases has a general search box and they have an advanced search. So that you can try to, if you want to, you could try to limit it down to like headline, title. I think a few of them, like the Free Press and the News, even, I think there's an option to limit it to obituaries. So there are different search options, but you would definitely want to look at each database itself to see what fields can be searched if you're looking at the advanced search. And then I have another question here. I guess some of my screenshots were a little bit dated about our open hours. So just to reiterate, the library is open. It's normal hours, Monday through Friday, 10 until 5, and Saturdays, 10 until 4. So I'll have to go back and fix those. I thought I caught everything when I was reviewing it, but I guess I did not. So thanks for that catch. Any other questions? Comments? Definitely in that page, that family history page with the family history databases, you know, definitely look there to see not only if things have stopped access like Ancestry, but if we add new resources that can be accessed with your library card, that's where we're going to put them up.
Question, why is the Ancestry going offline at the end of the year? Is that they just have that available for COVID times, or what's the situation with all that?
That's what we were informed, that they made a special exemption for allowing remote access for a large period of time, and then whatever governing body or group that oversees Ancestry has made that decision to stop allowing that remote access. And our personal library subscription to Ancestry.com, our license agreement does not allow for remote access. So January 1st, if you want to use our Ancestry.com edition, you'd have to be in the building using one of our computers to get access to it. And we hope that's the only one, but we haven't heard anything new about newspapers.com yet. So I'm going to keep my fingers crossed for now. Okay. If there are no further questions, we'll kind of wrap it up, and I want to thank everyone for attending tonight again, taking your time out of your schedule during this holiday season. And hopefully we can see some of you, if you're near us, to come to some of our in-person events next year as we kick those off, and even some of our other virtual programs that we will be offering. Again, you can see that on our website itself. And with that, I'm going to stop my screen share. So thank you, everyone.